Hi everyone. This webinar, Deep Dive into Anti-Oppression, Equity, Accessibility, and Inclusion, is going to take us into the Community Engagement Almanac developed by TYTHEdesign in partnership with the Bureau of Harlem Neighborhood Health, a part of the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. TYTHEdesign provides social impact strategies that help build the capacity of government, nonprofits, and foundations to foster healthy communities and resilient cities. Today, we are going to focus on how to use the Community Engagement Almanac to plan with equity and inclusion at front of mind. Ideally, this toolkit is for someone working in and with communities. This could be in the role of government, community-based organizations, advocacy, or as a volunteer. The Almanac is designed to be approached in three main ways: for planning, skill building, and inspiration. If you're looking for an overview of the whole Almanac, review Webinar 1, How to Use the Community Engagement Almanac, and Webinar 2, for a deep dive into planning, facilitating, and evaluating. Today's webinar is going to focus on planning using the Equity and Inclusion Assessment and skill building with our mini guide for anti-oppression, inclusion, and accessibility. We'll also hear from the field on how inclusive engagements have improved community relationships. While we encourage you to take pieces together for full effect, each part of the Almanac has value for your team, so feel free to jump around to the sections that feel most relevant to you. Part 1. Review of the Spectrum of Engagement. Before we walk you through planning and skill building equitably, we want to review the spectrum of engagement. You may be feeling pretty familiar with this framework by now, so don't hesitate to jump ahead. But the Equity and Inclusion Assessment asks that you know what level of participation you expect from stakeholders, so we wanted to make sure you had a good grasp of the spectrum of engagement before we dive in. This spectrum, a framework developed by the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, is divided into 4 categories: outreach, consultation, collaboration, and shared leadership. Outreach is usually one-directional, with information flowing from your organization to stakeholders, like through phone, email, or social media campaigns. It's engagement with the purpose of informing and building the awareness of your stakeholders, with little space for collaboration. Consultation is more bidirectional. Information is presented to stakeholders who then give their feedback or input. It could involve surveys or interviews that prioritize gathering insights from the community. Involving stakeholders in a co-design process of decision-making is collaboration. Facilitated workshops and partnership support, for example, get stakeholders to buy in to a community initiative. Collaboration helps to build trust and long-term partnerships. Shared leadership is a process that takes time to build, but in doing so, all stakeholders take responsibility and ownership of the outcomes. It can be achieved through partnership development and micro-grants for community projects. As we mentioned, we use the spectrum of engagement to frame the Equity and Inclusion Assessment, so you'll hear more about it in the next section of the webinar. Part 2. Equity in the Field, with Hillary Clark, Program Strategist at TYTHEdesign.
Why does this matter? What's the point of community engagement if you only engage a small, specific audience? Oftentimes, those we exclude are the voices we need most to make informed community decisions. There's a need for equitable and inclusive community engagement everywhere. Almost every aspect of our engagement strategies can be improved with an equitable and inclusive lens. When planning a community engagement, people often miss simply asking the community what they need to make an engagement more inclusive. Every community is a little different. Every community has different needs. Every individual has different needs. Equity and inclusion is an expansive and ever-evolving field. Simply having a form or an email address where individuals can reach out and make accommodation requests or ask accommodation questions can immensely improve your relationship with the community and your ability to serve them. I wish I saw more of those accommodation request options. or engagement planners asking questions on how they can build better inclusion, or the ability for community members to give feedback and for planners to actually listen and address that feedback. Again, we do not know exactly what our community needs. We need to give space to learn this and continue to improve and adjust our engagement practices. Stakeholders we've engaged have faced any number of barriers. Language barriers are always something we're trying to address, ensuring we are offering materials in languages that the community actually speaks, and that is including ASL interpretation. Sound is one that's often goes a little ignored. Speakers may not be loud enough, or a room might be too echoey, which really impacts those with hearing loss or those who have sensitivity to other noises. Economic barriers like competing work schedules, broadband access, or childcare needs can hinder a lot of community members from engaging. Our team does a variety of things to accommodate for these needs. We always start our conversations with an assessment. What are we doing that is creating barriers and hindering some people from engaging with us? How can we improve? What can we offer? And how might the community tell us exactly what they need in order to engage with us? Already, we've seen having just the transcription available on Zoom allows people to understand and listen and engage in ways that we couldn't predict. You never know what accommodation request you're fulfilling and how that will help any number of other community members.
How to use the Almanac for planning. The Equity and Inclusion Assessment. How to ensure an equitable, inclusive, and accessible engagement. The assessment questions in this tool align with the spectrum of engagement, so you'll want to determine what level of participation you expect from your stakeholders before you start on this assessment with your team. Webinar 2 takes a deep dive into the purpose and planning tool to help you set your intentions, so feel free to review that video before continuing here. As you approach the Equity and Inclusion Assessment, you might want to consider setting aside as much time as necessary to complete the tool. The more time, thought, and dedication you commit, the stronger intentions and collaboration will be. Work with your engagement team to complete the tool collaboratively in order to build and sustain alignment on the agenda and logistics for your engagement. Use the tool as talking points during planning meetings. And finally, ensure that everyone on the team has a copy of the tool after completion. It's important to note that the assessment questions build on one another. For example, if you're leading a collaborative engagement, like a roundtable discussion, you'll address the questions in outreach and consultation as they build on each other. If your plan is to host a tabling event in the park, however, you'll only need to answer the questions in the outreach section. You may notice that outreach is the longest section of the assessment because we consider it the key to getting your bearings and laying a strong foundation. No matter the type of engagement, everyone starts at outreach. The questions in this section of the assessment are designed to ensure that you know and understand your stakeholders and their motivations. For example, do you understand the socio-cultural context and inequities faced by your priority populations? And how might you offer multiple or non-traditional methods of outreach? The consultation section of the assessment asks you to complete outreach first. Remember, consultation involves soliciting feedback from stakeholders. Questions in this section help your team identify opportunities for building trust, like how can you encourage respect and transparency with stakeholders, prompting you to consider the clarity of your agenda when it comes to goals and ensuring confidentiality and privacy. In the collaboration section of the assessment, questions help your team provide more ownership of the space and the experience to your stakeholders by honoring their time or building a non-hierarchical space. For example, how are you building a flexible and fluid space? And we ask you to review your materials to ensure they provide adequate information to support participation from all stakeholders. Finally, when it comes to shared leadership, where stakeholders take ownership of the outcomes of the process, the assessment is intended to ensure your team builds strategies for supporting this level of engagement. This section focuses on including participatory decision-making opportunities in your engagement. While not necessary, we suggest using the mini guides in conjunction with the tools, ensuring your team has all they need to answer the planning questions. Once you're ready to build your team's capacity around equity and inclusion, it's on to that mini guide. Part 3. How to use the Almanac for skill building. Mini guide for anti-oppression, inclusion, and accessibility. Every organization, especially a city agency, has a role in ensuring that equity, inclusion, and accessibility are a reality. We have a responsibility to ensure that efforts to mitigate intentional and unintentional oppression are taken. And organizations don't risk perpetuating systemic and structural inequalities if they fail to address them directly. Enter the mini guide for anti-oppression, inclusion, and accessibility, with reminders of barriers, strategies to prevent them, and best practices for providing access to all stakeholders. Barriers to Participation and Power Dynamics addresses how race, power, injustice, ability, language, immigration status, socioeconomic status, identity, and age all play major roles in engagement experiences. You need to understand your stakeholders in order to build equitable engagement. This section of the guide highlights best practices for addressing power dynamics, like challenging your assumptions and being flexible, ready to learn, and okay with discomfort. Doing so is in service of building and sustaining trust through welcoming environments, authentic relationships, and working towards transparency and accountability. Some best practices you'll find in this section include understanding your positionality. As an employee of an agency or organization working in a community, you'll want to consider the reputation of that institution and how it affects relationships and trust building. Fostering authentic relationships by prioritizing ongoing communication over one-off events, and working towards transparency and accountability by sharing results and findings from initiatives back to the community. An important barrier to consider in our current climate is the barrier to digital and internet access, often referred to as the digital divide. We need to understand digital literacy and access barriers of stakeholders, especially in planning virtual, hybrid, or phone engagements. Our next webinar will provide plenty of additional support on this. It's important to consider that internet-capable devices and access can be cost prohibitive. Digital literacy extends to one's ability to navigate hardware and software, and age and socioeconomic status play a major role in an individual's digital literacy. You must understand your community's capacity, and you can start by finding out their comfort level with digital access and connection capabilities by mailing out a survey in advance. Build their capacity as part of your engagement by offering time before an engagement to teach stakeholders how to use the platform. Provide internet access during an engagement or digital literacy learning opportunities before or after. Stakeholders with disabilities are among the most diverse and vulnerable groups in a community, and engagement efforts must take this into account. This section of the mini guide provides key definitions and framing to support your capacity to provide access to everyone in your community. We want to reiterate here that any definitions on this subject are constantly changing, so it's incredibly important to understand the current context and be ready to evolve with the language, because language matters. There is much debate among the disability community around language, as it can be very personal. It's essential that as a program planner and facilitator, you are sensitive to the words you choose. With that in mind, this section of the mini guide for anti-oppression, inclusion, and accessibility outlines some common barriers and best practices to address them. The first type of barrier you'll find is attitude, referring to the social perception of people with disabilities, and a best practice to break down this barrier is to invite stakeholders to tell you what they may need, rather than assuming with best intentions that you may already know. Then there's communication, which relates to things like reading, speaking, and processing abilities. But having transcripts and closed captioning available for virtual engagements, for example, can be a huge support. Mobility deals with physical obstacles that affect movement or access, and something as simple as ensuring there are chairs or benches can remove this barrier for many. Policy becomes a barrier when there is a lack of acknowledgement of laws or regulations in place that protect the rights of people with disabilities. By asking for accommodation needs, like translation services or ASL interpretation, on registration forms and engagement marketing materials, stakeholders know that you're looking out for them. Barriers in programming can be reduced by carefully considering the time of day you're offering a program, while social barriers might be addressed by considering the representation of your team. Is your team representative of the diversity among your stakeholders? And the last barrier the guide mentions is transportation, ensuring that all participants can independently access your engagement site could be addressed by choosing a location near public transit. In addition to outlining these best practices, this section offers a growing list of resources to support you and your team in developing their capacity around accessibility and inclusion from some of the most trusted organizations in the field. Providing accessible engagement opportunities for all stakeholders will improve the quality of the experience for everyone involved. Remember, not all disabilities are visible. Listen and be patient. And don't be afraid to ask questions. Best practices are ever evolving. They simply serve as a starting point. Equity in the Field with Arlen Zamula of the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene.
My name is Arlen Zamula. I work for the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. I'm actually the Health Equity Capacity Building Director in the Harlem Bureau of Neighborhood Health. So we did this really great qualitative research project on food insecurity, where we not only collected people's experience, but we reported it back to them. But how we reported it back was actually a really unique community engagement. We brought the participants back for a lunch and we had a great meal and conversation about our findings. Now, this was kind of tricky because the participants were speaking English, Mandarin, and Spanish, but we didn't want to have separate lunches. That's not what the community is about. The community is together. So we had different translators, we had mixed groups, and not only did they verify the information we collected was correct, but it also made people feel valued and it helped build relationships within our participants. I think another piece of it is also this experience also changed us and changed our approach. We're going to use COVID as the big example because that really forced us to think outside of the box. How do you reach people when you can't be near people? It was really important for us to be flexible and patient in the process. Technology became a really important tool for community engagement, right? You can use tools like Zoom to meet a lot of people in the safety of their own home, but that doesn't always meet those who are not technically savvy or have access to the internet. And those tend to be the most vulnerable. What we've done is we've had conversations with the team, and I'll give an example where most of our participants are seniors. And we reached out to not only connect to make sure they were doing okay, but provide information and resources. But we also encourage those seniors to give our phone number out to their friends and other participants. So our network grew. And so we not only were able to reach people with using the new technology, but we did it old school. We gave people calls. And that not only helped us ensure that our participants who are probably the most vulnerable were being connected with great information and resources, it also combated their loneliness and helped with their mental health. They knew someone was at the other end of the phone was really important during COVID.
Those with disabilities know best what they need and how to create engagements that serve them. If you're developing an engagement to reach a specific disability community, be sure to utilize members of that community in your planning. Nothing about us without us. Open communication is key to accessibility across all barriers. We encourage you to explore this toolkit and take advantage of all of its unique components. We also offer key sections of the Almanac in Spanish. Review our first webinar in the series, How to Use the Community Engagement Almanac, for more of an overview of the whole toolkit, or our second webinar for a deep dive into planning, facilitating, and evaluating. And check back in for our upcoming session on community engagement formats. You'll hear from more community members who share their experiences from the field. Until then, thank you for joining us for this Community Engagement Almanac webinar.